Welcome to another video on the VFR 750, and again we're returning to the steering head bearings. This is not a job that I can ever remember doing where I've upgraded from the ball race to the taper type bearings. I've stripped them down before, I've greased them and redone them up and all that kind of stuff. A long time ago I did an XS 1100 from scratch. I remember doing that. But that was a long time ago. So I wanted to just reiterate what I've said before about making these videos. I'm not making this video to show you this is how you do this job. I'm making this video to show you this is how I've done it, right? Now I go back on to what I said before about being a motor mechanic very early on in my life, the skills that I picked up from that. I wasn't a great motor mechanic, I wasn't in the trade long enough to become that. And then through the years, as I said, I nickpicked on bikes and cars and did certain jobs and so forth and kept my hand in it. But for a long period, I didn't. I was out riding and buying bikes and I would just let the dealers service them. So this has been a real return to my roots for me. And I wanted to say that, the thing is, and I've said it before, is that when you're going to do something on your bike, make sure that you do as much research as you can. Don't just take the first thing that you see on YouTube and go that that's gospel, or the first website that you visit. You need to just gather all your information, ask all your questions, get your own general idea of how you think the job should be done. Now the thing is that these jobs potentially can be dangerous. If you think about your steering, if you think about your swinging arm suspension, if you think about your wheel bearings, if any of that's not done right, the outcome on a motorbike could be catastrophic. It could be life-threatening. So it's not something you do lightly. If you're unsure, if it all scares you, get someone else to do it, So, like I say, I'm going through it myself, and I may well, I'm rusty, I may well do things. Somebody might make a comment and say, that's a bad idea to do it that way. Again, this is what this is all about. It's all about gathering information. If I put it out there, I've got to be prepared to listen to what other people have got to say. They might be right, they might be wrong, it might just be a difference of opinion, right? But it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, all I care about is that I'm capturing this for me, for my old age, which isn't that far away. But I'm also willing to share it because I feel that every single thing that you can go to and you can reference, then it's, you can cherry pick the bits you like best. You'll start to see the bits that cross over where some people are all saying the same things, and then you can start to realise what's kind of accurate and what isn't accurate. These ball race type bearings. Now, the thing is that the minute you see any rust, or when I made the first video, I actually cut out a comment because when I was looking at the top of the steering race, I initially thought it was like copper slip, right? And I think I said it in the video, this is like copper slip, But then of course, as I'm watching the video after I've edited it, I thought, that's crazy, who the fuck would put copper slip on a bearing, right? And then I realised it was grease and rust, but the minute you see water ingress, any kind of water, any kind of rust on the bearing, you should replace it, right? Even if the head races look perfect, just replace it. And the minute you come across these old type ball races, I mean, you can replace them like for like, and you can follow the manuals, and you'll get all the torque settings, and you could do all that, and put the same back in again. But the taper roller bearing kits are much better. They'll last longer, they're stronger, they're going to be more reliable. But they are different, and you have to treat them slightly different from these. For instance, the torque settings are in the manual for this, don't apply to the taper roller bearings. and I'll get onto that when we get round to doing the job. Right, so you can get these kits from All Balls Racing, and they come as a taper rolling kit. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is once I get the races out, I'm going to measure these up, compare them, make sure that everything looks like it should fit. I'm not assuming that these will just go in. I'm going to check the depths and make sure there's not going to be any issues with these. Because at that point, if there was, then I can go back to their techie support people and ask about it, you know. So like I say, we could go to their support, we could find out, you know, if I've got any queries or questions, I could ask them. If there's any doubt, then I'm not going to go ahead. I'm going to look into it deeper. Because steering's fundamental on your bike. When you're on a motorcycle, when you're doing 100 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour, the last thing you want is for something to go wrong with your steering. If you've ever been in a tank slapper, and I've been in 2 in my life, it's the closest you'll ever come to actually shitting yourself, because it's a very scary thing to happen. So, you know, if the steering in any way is compromised, you're at risk. So my initial job is to get the inner races out, and then to get this race off the bearing, this part here. Now, for the initial step, you can get a long drift. I've taken some photographs of the actual inner bearings, inner races, and I'm going to try and highlight in the photograph the slots. There's little slots within the steering stem that allows you to get a drift in. Now, you can quite often on some of them get round them all with a drift, but on the VFR there is actually specifically tapered ramps, if you like, that lets you get a better purchase. Now, you can use a big drift, you know, a long blunt chisel or a blunt screwdriver, whatever tickles your fancy, and you can bash these out. And then obviously you've got to knock them out fairly even as you take them out, exactly as you have to put them in. But I'm going to experiment with this. I bought this off of eBay. It was 30 odd pound. The idea being that you draw up the tube, this springs in, and then it sits in behind the bearing cup, and it gives you 4 points of contact. Bang bang, hopefully it'll come out. Let's see how that works out. Stop recording. Right, so I don't know how well this is going to work, but let's just give it a go. Okay. Well, that's it in, and I can see it up against the cup. So that's not looking too shabby. Try that again. It felt like it went there. All right, that's it. It came out, but how well it came out, let's have a look. Right, so there's this bearing, the bottom bearing. There is some marks where the balls have been sitting. I mean, I would replace this anyway because of the type of ball race it is. So that worked okay. I'm not convinced that you just wouldn't do the same with a drift. I just thought I'd give it a try because it was relatively cheap and it looked like a good idea. Now, I think the thing to do with this is just you've got to make sure you've kind of got it in the right place. You've got the bearing race itself, and then you've got the cup. You've got the base that it sits on, and that's actually, is it? Yeah, there's actually a lip there. So you don't want the tool to be on that because you're just going to be knocking on the actual frame. It's got to be up against that cup. I mean, this almost feels like, I feel like I'd be better doing it with a proper drift, but we'll give it a go. This almost feels like I'd be better doing it with a proper punch, but we'll give it a go. Just going to put a cover over it so that it doesn't spring up. Now I'm going to go nuts with this. I'm going to have a wee look and see if it's moving. It is moving, but I tell you, they're tight. That is tight. Just making sure it's coming out fairly even. There she blows. So yeah, I'm going to say tool worked really quite well. You've just got to be very careful about it, and you've got to watch what you're doing and make sure that actually it's going up against the proper lip. Otherwise you could find yourself hammering to your heart's content, only to realise that you're in the wrong place. This one's a lot worse. See, you can see, I've got a torch. We can get into there. Hopefully I'm showing you it. So I mean, because it's the ball race bearings anyway, and because I spotted the rust in the top, they were always going to get replaced. They were going to get replaced anyway, them being the ball race bearings. But there you can see the kind of marking on the face. And I'll try and see if I can show you what I was talking about with the tool. See on this one here, you see how there's a lip? So you've got the recess bit here. Let's see if I can point this out to you. So right below where my finger is, you can see the cutaway where you're meant to put your drift in. And if you look under there, you'll see there's a lip. There's a lip there. So you wouldn't want your tool on that because you're not knocking the race out, you're actually just going to be battering this to death. The race sits on top of that. You've got to make sure that you've got that tool on the race. So that's the only thing you've got to be careful about. Now down the bottom it's slightly different. If I shine it down the bottom, you'll see there isn't any kind of boss like that at all, right? In the bottom, you've still got these here to help you get the bearing out, right? But because obviously I was able to put the tool down into this area, it sat on the rest of it as well and managed to get it out. So I'd give that tool a reasonably good thumbs up, because they were tight. I mean, I was using, you know, one of these hammers, you know, so they were quite tight. I mean, they're meant to be tight, you know, I mean, they're meant to be tight because they're interference fit, so, but yeah, the tool did a good job of getting it out, I think. You can see some of the rust just sitting in there over the years. We'll get all that cleaned up. You've got to make sure you get all these really nice and clean before you put in the new bearings. But that's them out without any damage at all, and that's what you want. So the next thing is the tricky thing, is this mother here. So let's see how we get on with that. So you can see the fun bit is getting this off. Now what you've got to do is you've got to get a chisel in behind here. There is no way really of pulling this off. When you replace it with the taper roller bearings, because they've got a lip on them, there is a tool that you can use, and I do have a tool, but it's no good for this because there's no lip to grip onto. So this was always going to be a chisel job. So all I've done is I've put this chisel here in behind here to get some purchase, and I've done the same on the other side, and you can see the bearing is actually starting to move. So I'm going to continue with that and see where I get. Stop recording. Right, so we're getting some success. I've been kind of lucky. I've managed to move it from it being dead to the bottom. Obviously what you're trying to do is you're getting the chisel in and you're only going as far as enough to catch it. The trouble with this one is that it's quite hard to get it from this side, so I don't want to keep just, you know, I want to try and get it as even as I can. So I've got it this far and it looks pretty level and it's almost there. Right, so in the end it was just old-fashioned. You haven't got a lot of choice with this one, because if you look at it, right, there's no lips or anything to get pullers onto. If you get the upgraded taper roller bearings, there is a Motion Pro tool that you can use to help get those off, and that's something that, you know, when you upgrade, at least, you know, getting them off in the future might be a lot easier. For this one, there was no choice but to get in behind, and I used a very blunt chisel. This chisel is older than me. I think this chisel came from my dad's toolkit. My dad was born in 1908. He died when I was 17. So I've had this a long time, and it's really blunt. So with something like that, you're going to do the minimum of damage trying to get in behind it. Now you've got to try and get in behind it to get purchase on it. Initially you're putting it in at the angle, and of course you've got this seal. You'll see that in the end I cut this off to give me a bit more room, right? But in the end you want to be getting behind, you know, initially you're getting in here because there's no space, right? And you're hammering it in there, and you want as blunt an instrument as you can to do that. This was ideal. So I've been very lucky because this actually wasn't really overly tight, right? It wasn't overly tight, and as you can see, there's very little in the way of there's no marks here at all. So I did manage to keep this away from it. The trouble is that when you get round to this side, you don't have any way in. Okay, you can get in initially to get it budged, but there's no way in, right? It's goosed at that point. So you're really having to rely on getting it in from sort of these two sides, but you're trying to keep it as even as you can so that the bearing comes off. Now this one moved right away, so I knew I was onto a winner, and I just kept persevering. Like I say, I took the seal off just to make life easier in the end, to give me a bit more space. There is a mark on the shaft there, but I'm not aware of causing that. But maybe when it's been coming up. I mean, it's a bit barbaric what you've got to do to get it off. But that's it. That's it off. So I'm going to take that off of there, and I'm going to put this nut back on here just to protect the top of the stem. And that is the bearings removed. We'll put that there. That is the bearings removed. The next job now will be to start putting it all back together. I'm going to cover that in a separate video, and I'm going to have my own opinion about how you can do that and how I think you should do that. As I said, go out there and check along as many videos as you can, as many web links, get an idea of what you're doing, get lots of different opinions. Unfortunately, this one here is a bit of a brutal task. It can be a lot worse than what it was there. So once I had so far, if I'd had a leg puller, I probably could have got the rest of it that way, but I don't have anything like that, unfortunately. I need to get something like that. I am going to get some leg pullers, it would be handy. But actually it came off really quite well, so I'm quite pleased with that. So I've got all this to clean up, get it all cleaned up before we put it back in place. I might even get fancy, and I might even clean it all and even contemplate painting some of it. We'll see. Anyway, that's the video for today. The tool that I bought that went up the shaft, that worked really quite well, I've got to say. £30 odd, I think that was worth buying. You can do the same with a drift, but with this you just got one point to hit. You don't have to go around, you just put this in. But like I say, you've got to be very careful that you are actually getting these lips on the right place. But that is just a matter of being careful about what you're doing. And the other part was done with an old-fashioned set of tools, because really that was the only way I could do it. But it's done. So the new taper bearings, you've got to watch how you put those in, as far as how you torque them, if you're going to torque them. I'll get onto that when we do it, because it's a bit more involved. The settings that are in the manual are for these ball race type bearings. So the taper roller bearings don't go anywhere near the torque of these. But we'll cover that in the other video. But like I say, the important thing is that I'm just showing you how I'm doing it. You've got to find out how you want to do it. Get as many good sources as you can. Don't just rely on one source. But we're getting closer. We're getting closer. Anyway, I've had enough for this weekend, and I'll sign off and wish you a happy Sunday. Take care. Bye for now.